Two things are true. Johnny Cash was a hard-living outlaw music star who struggled with alcohol and drug addiction. And Johnny Cash became a Christian. He believed in Jesus. For some people, those two things are hard to hold in their heads as being non-contradictory. It is hard to believe that a sinner can also be a saint. This episode, this season finale of the Sarah Connor Chronicles, has some pretty dark moments in it. At one point, Ellis, the FBI agent, says that a person who murders two people and then lies about it without a hint of emotion can't really be human, even if they appear to be human. But humans do awful things all the time. We don't even come close to living up to the moral standards we hold others to. Is there a standard of judgment higher than the human conscience? Is there a judgment coming? Will the man come around? And when he does, will he find faith on the earth? Jesus once said, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God." We will try to answer some of these questions in this episode. I'm Calvin.
And I'm Ian.
Come with us if you want to live.
We've reached the season finale. This has been...
It's the season finale! Woo!
Woo!
This was a short season. It was a short season, only 9 episodes. Which is short for broadcast television, not short for streaming nowadays.
Yeah, that's largely because of the strike. I've watched all the commentaries for this season on the Blu-rays, and they talk about how the showrunners and writers actually were not part of production for this season for anything except the pilot, and the non-writing producing partner had to showrun the entire show because of the writer's strike. So that's why it's so short, and it's honestly kind of impressive that I think that they were able to get everything to a place where you could tell a finale instead of just kind of ending, because this does have a finale quality to it. Would you say?
It does, and it begins with the, I don't know if you watched the recaps at the beginning of the episode, but this episode had a very thorough recap of the entire season, which I thought was masterfully edited. It hit all of the major plot beats of the entire season in the span of a minute or two. So we've got John Connor, Sarah Connor, and a Terminator named Cameron travel 8 years into the future. They eventually encounter Kyle Reese's older brother, Derek, who has traveled from the future to the past. Derek Reese does not trust Cameron the Terminator. Charlie, Sarah's ex EMT boyfriend, fiance, and the FBI agent, James Ellis, are very confused about what's going on. There's a supercomputer that was invented by a guy named Andy Turk who was killed that may become Skynet, and they are all being pursued by a Terminator named Cromartie, who is wearing the face of an out of work Hollywood actor. All of this is explained in the recap for this episode.
So we open up in an internet cafe. As you pointed out, it's very 2008. There's a lot of things that you just wouldn't see from things like using cash.
Do internet cafes even exist in the United States now?
Technically, yes, but they're called libraries.
This is true. Unfortunately, public libraries have ceased to be a place where people read books and have mostly become a place where people browse the internet for free on taxpayer dime.
We also have this great
Uh,
flashback of Derek and Kyle playing baseball as the nukes go off. Serves as a kind of nice through line for the episode of family and then a caretaker and a younger vulnerable person, which of course has the parallel with Sarah and John. How did you read that?
did we
That
know?
over?
Did we know that Derek was Kyle's older brother before this episode? I forget.
I don't think so.
And there's also a pretty significant age gap. Like Derek is 7 years older than Kyle was. I
I
don't
think
know. It's
that's right.
interesting. It does. It provides the emotional through line through this episode. We get a little monologue from Sarah about how we wish that we could stop time, that we could have a moment of peace and innocence that lasts forever. But that in a fallen world, that is not possible. Um, and then, yeah, we get this vision of Kyle Reese, 8-year-old Kyle Reese, looking up in the sky and seeing a sky full of nuclear missiles, which is how the recent movie Oppenheimer ends, but it's how Kyle and Derek's story begins.
Do you think that so much of the Terminator, the Sarah Connor Chronicles, and of course Terminator 2 is focused around this idea of trying to stop Skynet's activation and stop Judgment Day? And a lot of people get very upset about Terminator 3 and even Sarah Connor Chronicles basically saying that Judgment Day is inevitable. Um, but I think that that feels more true to me than the idea that you can stop Judgment Day. How do you feel about that?
Well, I mean, this is not only the season finale of uh, the series that we're reviewing, it's also perhaps a stopping point and retrospective for this podcast. And you and I have both been approaching watching this series from our own worldview. And so I really meant what I said when I was kind of putting my own spin on Sarah Connor's monologue at the beginning of this episode that the world is fallen. That uh, evil and human sin pervades the world. And that cannot be altered by merely human action. And so, in that sense, I think Terminator 3 and maybe more explicitly, this television series does approach the concept of Judgment Day from a worldview that says that because evil is real, uh, Judgment Day is inevitable.
Well, and you and I
That
believe that Judgment
humankind's
Day.
pursuit of certain kinds of technology combined with the wickedness of human nature makes Judgment Day inevitable.
You and I believe that Judgment Day, in some senses, is going to happen no matter what, with the return of Christ to judge. Now, whether we believe that comes in a pre, a, or post millennial fashion is a matter of debate, although somewhat academic to me. But I think that Judgment Day, to some extent, is more a story of the fall than a true apocalypse. Um, with the pre Judgment Day world as kind of a Garden of Eden, and the Judgment Day being Adam and Eve eating the apple, and then John Connor, JC, being forced to redeem humanity and bring them to a new understanding and new way of living to defeat the sin that has corrupted and threatens to destroy the world.
Yeah, I mean, in a theological sense, maybe the Judgment Day envisioned by the Terminator franchise is more analogous to uh, the flood than it is to the final judgment. And that you're right that it sets humanity back, um, and only a small remnant are preserved. But it doesn't ultimately conclude the story of this world. In the same way that uh, Judgment Day in the biblical story does.
Yeah. I could also say that maybe it's like the Assyrians or the Babylonians conquering Israel and carrying them off, or the destruction of the temple by the Romans in 70 AD. It's much more a hostile thing than, I mean, the judgment day of God is not destruction, it is judgment and remaking. So I think James Cameron is perhaps a bit theologically confused, shall we say.
Well, I mean, yeah, we are, like I said, uh, we're not making this up. I mean, this series in particular, and maybe the entire franchise implicitly, but this series explicitly is calling upon Christian theological themes. And one of the main characters in the show is a Christian that quotes from the Bible frequently. So we're not reading something into the text that isn't there, but we are approaching this particular text from a particular point of view. Um, uh, yeah, I mean, yes, Skynet is kind of like the Babylonians. Yeah, that's true. Um, there is a scene in this episode in which, and it's not really commented upon, but it is a somewhat striking image where John is in a science museum and he's sort of staring at the reconfigured fossil remains of a dinosaur, and it's not commented upon explicitly in any way in that scene, but that's sort of the secular myth of the fall, which is that mammals emerged as an evolving animal group after the extinction of dinosaurs. And so that's the story that material naturalist worldview tells. And you could present the story of Skynet as a new species gaining dominance on the Earth after the extinction of the previous sentient species, which is humanity.
Perhaps, but I would argue that the dinosaurs were wiped out by the flood. So I think that your comparison of Judgment Day to the flood is perhaps even more apt, um, although certainly unintended by the writers.
That would be getting to dive into that topic would be to get far off the subject of this podcast. But anyway, I have my own ideas about dinosaurs and such. But
So we have our introduction of this Australian bad guy who we're led to believe is a man named Sarkisian, who has the Turk or is searching for
which
the
is
Turk.
Armenian.
What did I say?
You said Australian, but yes, it's a something of a joke at the beginning of this plot line that Cameron notes that the surname Arkissian is Armenian, and therefore she has apparently spent all night learning the Armenian language because she doesn't sleep.
I mean, I don't think she learns it. I think she's like Neo in the Matrix. She just downloads it to her brain.
Downloads Armenian. Yeah.
What do you think?
I would like to think that Cameron is like learning Armenian by flipping through an Armenian grammar at like Superman speed.
That'd be work. But her pronunciation
rather than merely downloading it. But anyway.
What do you think about Sarkisian as a season finale villain? I feel he's a little weak. The actor does a good job. And the plot works with the callback to the false document forger and his family, but I think it still feels a bit truncated. This feels more like the kind of villain that'd be like in an episode of the week, and they turned it into serious consequence villain in this episode for a finale. But I don't know. It doesn't quite feel like a true season finale to me with the threat and the depth of the villain.
I don't know. I mean, it's like you said, part of the problem with this season is that it was created right before a writer's strike. And so there's some plot threads that are created in this season that aren't fully followed through in season 2. The continent of Australia has its own significance in season 2. But I don't know that the fact that the bad guy of the week that we meet in this season finale being Australian has any connection to that. Yeah, I think it's just writer's strike wonkiness. Now, I think in some sense it does work because it illustrates sort of the banality of human evil. That these are apparently just 3 dudes who wanted money, and were willing to put someone's daughter in a very dangerous situation. for reasons of mere greed.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
I feel like this is more akin to the ballerina subplot than anything truly significant. I just don't think there's a lot of depth to Sarkisian. Um, and I think that's partly because I think season one was supposed to deal with Cromartie as the season finale bad guy, but of course they couldn't build to that quickly enough.
Um, yeah, let's talk about the Cromartie, the conclusion of the Cromartie plot line a little bit, and then circle back to the climax of the Circassian plot line. So we have an A plot and a B plot and sort of a C plot in this episode. The C plot is that it is John's birthday. The A plot is what we've already discussed, that someone named Circassian stole the Turk, and is willing to possibly sell it to Sarah Connor, but really just wants to extort money from her. Once they figure out who Sarah Connor is. The B plot is really, in some sense, the plot that has most to do with this being the season finale. The B plot is Ellison's pursuit of the Terminator Cromartie, who is posing as an out of work Hollywood actor who is posing as an FBI agent.
Mask on mask.
And that ends in what is probably the most memorable scene in this episode, which is what I alluded to in my introduction, a montage of a team of FBI agents being completely destroyed by Cromartie to the tune of the Johnny Cash song "When the Man Comes Around."
And it brilliantly uses a lack of budget and turning it into a strength by having Cromartie kill and then throw the bodies of the FBI agents who are all in black into a pool in the apartment complex he's staying. And it's all filmed from inside the pool as the agents' bodies are being flung into the pool. And it's poetic and horrifying and really well conceived, and also a lot cheaper than trying to film a bunch of fireworks and gunfights.
Yeah, it's a very effective sequence. Not least because "When the Man Comes Around" is a great song. I don't know if you care about that or not, but as an aficionado of vocal music and Johnny Cash, I think that it's a great song.
Well, I mean, there's so many pieces that fit together in this. I would even argue maybe the Ellis plot is the A plot for the episode because it's where we get the title with the Revelation quote and the reference with the Johnny Cash song and all the agents in black and Cromartie himself being a very dark figure. I don't think he's literally wearing all black, but he's definitely dark. I think that the driving force and the punch of the episode is the Ellis plot, even though our main characters are technically completely disconnected from it.
Okay, so let's have a. I mean, the first part of the Ellis plot is very procedural. Ellis is just tracking down leads. he has a conversation with Charlie where he's like, "Come on, man, I know that robots are real. Admit robots are real." And Charlie's like, "I don't know what you're talking about." And then he has a conversation with his superior, which maybe contains the sort of ethical thesis of this episode, where it's questioning. He's saying the person who perpetrated these crimes could not possibly be human, by which he means there's a double entendre, because he's talking to his superior, who of course does not believe in robots. So there's a double entendre that he's of course talking about the fact that it was robots, but the way that he describes the crimes that Cromartie has committed could, from the perspective of a normie FBI agent, describe the work of a severely psychologically disturbed serial killer. And so there's this question that we've returned to again and again in this series of, in pursuing Terminators, is it possible for humans to become like Terminators? And if you perpetrate that kind of evil, can even a human person cease to be human in a certain sense?
Well, that is, of course, the theme of pretty much every scene with Sarah, Derek, and John in this episode. And Sarah, in perhaps the most season finale part of this episode, makes that little speech about it matters because fighting Skynet is their task. Living life is who they are. They have to remain human. They have to celebrate birthdays. They have to express love for each other and take delight in being alive. Otherwise, they have just become machines who exist to destroy enemies. And both Derek and Sarah express that, I think, reasonably powerfully in this episode.
Yeah, so let's talk about Derek, because the scene with Ellis and his FBI superior, in which she says some men become monsters, is juxtaposed with a scene in which Derek does something that is quite startling. Whether it makes Derek monstrous or not is a conversation that we can now have. Derek murders someone in front of, for what all he knows, is that person's 8-year-old daughter. And regardless of whose child she actually is, that 8-year-old girl will remember that for the rest of her life, and probably be severely scarred psychologically by it. Because Derek just shoots that guy in the head. Realistically, I think that from the range at which Derek shoots that guy in the head, his brain would just explode. It wouldn't just be a clean hole through the head.
This is
But
broadcast television, Calvin. You can't show that.
obviously this is broadcast television. Yeah. This is not a rated R movie. This was broadcast television, and so they can't show somebody's skull exploding. But yeah, shooting somebody in the head from what looked like maybe 10 feet away, that's pretty cold.
I mean, to be fair, that guy was pointing a gun. That guy was pushing a gun in John's face. So I'm not saying that I think Derek was wrong to kill him. And he does cover the girl's eyes, but he also threatens the girl.
Right. I mean, John, the guy that we at the moment think is Sarkassian has a gun to John's head, and Derek, although the way that they staged the scene, it's not sort of a shot for shot match. But Derek basically has a gun to a little girl's head.
Spiritually.
With the implicit threat that if you blow away John, I will blow away this little girl. And yeah, it's dark. It's a very dark scene, Ian.
Very dark.
Possibly as dark as Cromartie killing a dozen FBI agents and throwing them into a pool.
The Terminator goes hard, and I think it needs to. But it takes a toll. I watched this episode in college when it came out, and it stuck with me. It's chilling. It's uncomfortable. It hits hard.
And so, yes. And this is kind of why I framed my introduction in the way that I did. In the same way that Johnny Cash's life can be viewed from two different perspectives, Derek Reese can be viewed from two different perspectives. So if I say Derek Reese held a gun to an 8-year-old girl's head and threatened to kill her, that sounds like Derek Reese is a monster. If I say Derek Reese murdered a guy in the hopes of preventing nuclear Armageddon and the deaths of billions of people, you say, well, Derek Reese is a hero.
Well, I don't know. I still don't think he should have killed Andy.
What? You've come around? I'm the Andy advocate on this podcast.
You've convinced me. Andy,
I'm totally
Andy
against killing Andy.
He should have given Andy a chance.
Ambivalent about him killing Andy.
No, I don't think he should kill Andy. You've convinced me. But I do think he should have killed that gangster. That gangster was bad.
That gangster was bad. So who do you think the little girl is the daughter of? Is it the gangster that we thought was Sarkassian, or is it the internet cafe owner who we find out at the very end of this episode is actually Sarkassian?
I think
or is she just a random little girl?
Well, she says her daddy works for the cafe. So I feel like Sarkassian is the one that makes the most sense.
Okay, I honestly don't remember if that plot line is ever resolved. So
I don't
we'll
think
have to wait until we delve into season 4. But anyway, regardless of whether the Connors are successful at preventing the rise of Skynet, the rest of that little girl's life is going to be messed up.
Well, that's assuming she survives Judgment Day.
I'm laughing right now, but it's the rest. I'm laughing right now, but it's not funny.
No, it's very sad, like most things in Terminator. Speaking of little girls whose lives are completely messed up, we have the return of Angelino Latina Girl, who I believe on the commentary is called Chola Girl, who's basically the lookout slash
We
driver
had this
for.
debate. We had this debate during, was it episode 1 or episode 2? Is chola a racial epithet comparable to the N word, and so should we call her that?
I mean, the guys who wrote and directed the episode called them that. I don't think it's anywhere close to the N word, but I think there are very few words that are close to the N word. And the one
Okay.
specifically I know of for Hispanic or Mexican people is definitely not Chola.
Okay. I will continue to call her Angelino Latina Girl. Yes, Angelina Latina Girl comes back
Still
because
has
of
no
her
lines.
undying friendship slash weird sapphic vibes with Cameron.
I don't know where you're getting the sapphic vibes, man.
And she her main function is to track down the location of Australian gangster dude, um, which is helpful to the Connors. But we do have this interesting scene in which Cameron says, "Do I have to kill you too?" Long 1,000-yard stare, no dialogue, and then she hands her a gun. Why?
Well, the
That it
girl is.
seems uncharacteristic of Cameron. Like it makes no logical robot sense. Maybe Cameron is human after all.
Oh, am I convincing you that Cameron's human?
I mean, why does she hand her a gun? Okay, decide that she's not important enough to kill, but why hand her a gun?
So she can protect
It serves
herself
no purpose
because
from
Cameron
the
cares.
perspective of the mission. Protect herself or protect the Connors? Because
Well, not
if you
her,
think
not the
that the reason
Connors.
that Cameron gives her the pistol is to protect the Connors, then that makes sense for Cameron's mission. But if she hands it to Angelino Latina Girl for the purpose of protecting Angelina Latina Girl, it makes no sense for Cameron. Why would Cameron want to protect that person? Cameron has no interest, as far as we've discerned, in protecting human life when it has nothing to do with her mission.
Just ask that ballerina who is very, very dead.
Yeah, so tell me, Ian, why does she choose to protect Angelino Latina Girl but chooses not to protect uh Armenian, maybe ballerina girl?
I think that you can argue that Cameron is attempting to keep a finger in the world that could perhaps provide more false identities or other muscle in perhaps a big operation that she might need to plan later. I mean, we know from season 2 that she does cultivate assets when she doesn't sleep. And so she might cultivate Cholo Girl as an asset.
Okay, maybe.
Or maybe she's just human
That's
and cares about
very
her as a person.
maybe she's human and just cares about her person. Maybe there is a weird sapphic vibe.
I don't get the sapphic vibe that you got going here, man.
Okay.
They do get Sarkissian's hard drive, and then John is working on that. But Derek pulls him away and has a very complex conversation where like 3 or 4 big emotional bombshells are dropped.
This is true, and this is why, like I said in the introduction, Derek is both a sinner and a saint in this episode. Although maybe sinner is too strong a word from your perspective to describe him killing somebody at close to point blank range in front of an 8-year-old girl.
I think the real crime there was bringing the 8-year-old girl with intent to threaten her.
Okay, well, he does that, which is pretty messed up. But then he also does something that is pretty loving and kind towards John.
And interestingly, towards Sarah, too. The first of the emotional bombshells Derek drops is he says, "Your mother's never killed anyone. She has a pure heart."
Right, which, I quoted from the Beatitudes in my introduction. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. I mean, we've referenced various forms of biblical judgment. The reason that Noah and his family survived the flood is because he finds favor with God. So one thing that maybe we can discuss, but this series up to this point has not really explored, although I think it does explore it a little bit more in season 2, is the idea of gracious providence. The idea that the fact that Sarah and John and Derek have made it through this story so far means that while humanity is fallen and this world is fallen, that there is something like providence smiling upon them, insofar as they have not been completely destroyed by Skynet yet.
Yeah, and you could
Which is
argue
different from the James Cameron sort of ethos, which is no fate but the one we choose. But I think it's closer to what this television series seems to be saying within the Terminator franchise.
yeah, and I think that Cameron tried really hard to break out of the loop he created in Terminator 1, but again, going back to Terminator 3 and this show and every show, show and movie that has spun out of Terminator since then, I think there is gracious providence in the conception and raising and protecting of John Connor and his victory over the machines in the future. It's a bleak and it's a hard providence, but it is not a providence that has no mercy. It is a providence that does allow and even protect some from the fires of the nuclear flood.
All right, so establishing that as a baseline, what does it mean for Derek to say that Sarah Connor is pure in heart? With the acknowledgement that I'm probably adding more theological freight to that phrase than perhaps the writers of this show meant.
Well, the writers were very careful to not have Sarah kill anyone. So I don't think they were necessarily being deliberately theological, but they were certainly being very explicitly moral in a complicated way. Sarah's willingness to protect her son, but never killing directly for sure, is an interesting choice that the writers made deliberately. They could have had her just be like Cameron and just go around murdering people, but instead she's constantly trying to stop Cameron from murdering people. I think if the
Well, I
show were
think part of
today,
part of it goes
would
to
murder a bunch of people.
possibly, yeah. I mean, unfortunately, many uh, uh, a lot of corporate media content has taken a bleaker turn in the
A
past
lazier turn.
8, 8 years. Um, I mean, we both enjoy Batman. We both enjoy uh, the both the Netflix Daredevil series, and I think both of you and I are looking forward to exploring what Disney decides to do with Daredevil. Um, Up until this point, they've primarily used Daredevil as a comedic relief character, um, but Disney might do something interesting with him. Um, I mean, there are heroes in popular culture that have sort of no kill rules, and that makes a difference in sort of the moral weight of certain choices that those characters make.
I think it's interesting that the Marvel Cinematic Universe, from its first incarnation in Iron Man in 2008, had Tony Stark straight up destroying and murdering terrorists. Um, and Captain America had him be a soldier and explicitly killing both Nazis and Hydra soldiers. Um,
And Superman kills people.
well, I don't think he should. He did, but I don't think he should have.
Well, in the Snyder verse, Batman also kills people, but
I don't think he should have either. But I mean, he killed in the Tim Burton movies too, and you can argue that he killed in the Nolan movies. I don't. It's tricky,
uh,
but
anyway, um,
do you think it would be
I think
realistic?
the go ahead.
Do you think it would be realistic for Sarah to go through a whole? I think there were about 4 or 5 seasons planned of this show and not kill anyone.
Maybe. I mean, Sarah is the difference in the episodes of this season that have included the Derek Reese character. The difference in point of view between Sarah and Derek is that whereas Derek clearly sees the humans that made Skynet or planned for Skynet to exist as being complicit in the crimes of Skynet. and therefore worthy of death. Sarah sees a sharper divide between human and machine, and she is perfectly willing to destroy machines, and she's unwilling to destroy humans. I'm not sure that this series ever comes to a conclusion about which of those two perspectives is correct.
Especially given the direction the
Because I
series
think this
chooses to take.
because I think the series clearly wants to make the point that it's our collective fault as humanity that Skynet comes into existence.
How do you see that?
That Skynet is the result of human sin.
I don't know. You're
And I
probably
think it's
right.
developed as a theme in season 2 that if that original sin is ever to be overcome, then humans have to be the ones to make a change of some kind. And so that's kind of where the Ellis character goes in season 2. Not to provide too many spoilers for season 2. But season 2 seems to be interested in the question of if the fall is inevitable, is there a possibility of redemption? And what does that look like?
I imagine many vigorous debates between us, given our different assumptions about the nature of humanity and machines. I'm being a little vague here to prevent
I think
spoilers.
you and I more or less believe the same things about humanity. Maybe we have a difference about
I'm being
the
vague.
capacities of.
I'm trying to prevent spoilers,
Okay.
Calvin.
Okay.
You highlight the quote from Lord of the Flies, where a boy weeps for the end of innocence and the darkness of men's hearts after the boys kill a pig and celebrate death. Um,
Not just celebrate death, but I mean, this is the name of the novel. I mean, you could debate on whether to what Golding specifically had in mind from a religious perspective, but the name of the novel is Lord of the Flies, which is a translation of the Hebrew word Beelzebub, which is a moniker of the devil. So in the novel, one interpretation of the novel is that they sacrifice a pig to the devil. Now you could say that what Golding is saying is that the devil is a metaphor, and that the devil is just the human impulse for dominance through violence in that exists in all of us, because we pretend to be civilized, but we're really just evolved brutes, descended from apes, who kill each other with impunity, which is something that animal rights activists seem to ignore sometimes. I probably made this more complex than you were intending. Where were you going with this?
I think it's interesting that they choose to draw from this powerful image when they already had introduced so much powerful apocalyptic and revelatory imagery through Ellison and through Johnny Cash. Um, I don't know. It was an odd and powerful inclusion that I think is perhaps a bit out of place. Kind of why I wanted to draw attention to it from your notes.
I mean, this episode is jam packed with stuff.
It is. We still haven't talked about the fact that
and
Derek reveals his knowledge of John's father and his relationship to John. Like, what do you even think about that?
It's a very touching and emotional scene. I'm not sure that we can really say that much more about it than that. I mean, it is kind of tear jerky, and like
It's
I said,
very
it's
well
a
acted,
kind,
but
loving. It's a kind and loving thing for Derek to do for John.
yeah, I think it's
It raises all sorts of questions about the metaphysics of time travel. Apparently, the universe does not explode if you meet yourself in the Terminator franchise like it does in Back to the Future.
Well, despite its wonkiness, I feel Terminator has always tried to play a little more straight with the rules of time travel than Back to the Future.
I mean, it seems like if Derek knows so much about the future, they should take a page from the Back to the Future book, and he should have no problems with finding ways to get money because he's got Gray's Almanac or whatever. But anyway, yeah. I mean, this is the classic nerd nitpick. Like, there's just so many things that if time travel technology existed the way that it seems to, you could poke all sorts of plot holes in this entire franchise. But like, why can't Derek travel back to, like, 1870s and buy an oil field, so that the resistance has unlimited supplies of money, like, and then apparently Skynet has technology that allows them to travel forward in time, because that's how it worked in the pilot episode of this series. So why isn't that a thing in the rest of the series?
The logic of time travel, man.
It's a touching scene. To go back to your question about the concluding Sarah monologue, yeah, I mean, if I had written this episode, the Johnny Cash sequence would have been just the end of the episode. I wouldn't have felt a need to put another denouement on top of that. But the writers of this episode apparently did. And so I think what they're trying to say is kind of what we talked about before, that there's a connection between human culpability and the monstrousness of Terminators like Cromartie. That as different as they seem, gangsters who want to extort money from people are in some sense not that different from a robot that's been programmed to kill anybody that gets in the way of his mission.
Yeah, I think that is the parallel that we're intended to draw, especially with the final scene of Cameron being blown up in the car by Sarkisian.
Yes. Which is kind of a fake cliffhanger because logically we know that Cameron cannot be blown up in that way. For the same reason that apparently it is easier for Cameron to crumple a concrete wall than it is for her to crumple a steel metal door. I'm not entirely sure if that's true. I would have to ask a structural engineer, but
I think that was just because it looked cooler.
I think it probably looked cooler. Yeah, I think that's why she did that. That's not the reason that she gives in the show, but that's probably the real reason, is that it looked cooler.
It gives you that horror monster going through the wall.
Just breaking the doorknob like Jessica Jones would have been cheaper. Because they had to pay for the effects of her smashing her fist through cinder blocks. But
it looked cooler, and it was a season finale, so why not?
Why not?
Well, that brings us to the end of our episode. Any final thoughts on what he beheld?
I don't know who listens to this podcast or what they think of what we say, but if it hasn't been clear already, I think that there is an actual Judgment Day. So, in addition to thinking about this episode, maybe to all of our listeners out there, think about that. And what it would
lost
mean
your audio.
to survive by becoming pure in heart.
Because I can't hear anything.
It's the Lord of the Flies, Ian. I didn't do anything different. I don't know why you can't hear me. I haven't.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Why don't you say what you're saying again? Because I didn't hear anything what you're saying.
Okay. I don't know who listens to this podcast, or if anybody listens to this podcast, or what they think of what we have to say. But I think that there is a real Judgment Day coming, and that the only people that will survive that will be people who are pure in heart. And so I think it would be worth it if you're listening to this podcast for you to consider the claims that the Bible makes about how you can become pure in heart in order to survive Judgment Day.
I would second that suggestion. You can leave comments on our Substack if you have questions about that, or you can just read the Gospels. They lay it out pretty clearly there. Anyway,
Well, we're probably going to take a couple month break just because of various things that we have going on in our lives. So we'll pick back up in the summer probably sometime.
with
Until
season
then,
2, I'm Ian.
we'll be back. I'm Calvin. We'll be back.
All right.